Good day, listeners, and welcome to Don't Imbibe the Kool-Aid. I'm Kim Kennedy, and I'm your host for today's program. If you ever want to reach out to us, if you have feedback, which we do welcome, we can be reached at kimmergroup@gmail.com. That's KMMRGROUP@gmail.com. Today, I want to discuss with you, I don't know if you guys are familiar with HR Bill 8511 and Senate Bill 4390. These are bills that could eliminate federal contracting goals for women-owned small businesses and weaken programs designed to help minority-owned firms compete for government contracts. We want to dive into that with Bruce Torres, who is the Director of Communications for the American Small Business League, which investigates federal small business contracting fraud and advocates for America's small business community. Bruce, how you doing? Glad to have you back on the program.
I'm glad to be back and to be with you, and very excited to talk about these very important things.
Yeah, Bruce. Didn't know that these bills existed, and why is this organization, American Small Business League, sounding the alarm on that? What do they see as problematic?
The problem will be more, if not all, federal contract dollars going to the 1/10 of 1% of companies that are big businesses. And because they're already big, Kim, they create next to no new jobs. Small businesses create the vast majority of all jobs in America every year. So to take contract dollars in business away from small businesses hurts the economy, hurts our livelihoods, and serves that teeny tiny 1/10 of 1% of corporations owned and profiting the elite of the elite. It's an example of the corporate capture of Washington, D.C. for all intents and purposes. And when enough people know that we are nothing but a small business nation, we hope to inspire more people to do something, to lean on their representative and their senators, please.
That I've never heard before, Bruce, and I'm thankful that this organization is bringing it to light. Tell me something. Do you happen to know if the local chapters of Chamber of Commerce's in towns and cities across the country know about these bills?
Our impression is that they don't, and we know that because we're reaching out to many of them, especially in the districts of the congressman who introduced it in the Congress, Glenn Grothman in Wisconsin, and also in the state of Utah, those chambers of commerce, because one of their senators, Mike Lee, introduced the Senate version of these bills. They are identical.
So Mike Lee, Senator Mike Lee, the conservative, introduced this bill?
Yes, and we're not surprised because we have been maintaining for years that Republicans have always been, unfortunately, broad brush, every single Republican. Well, there might be one or two who don't, but for the most part, as a party and as their measures, they are anti-small business. For all the rhetoric, for all the politicians who stand at a lectern and say, small businesses are the backbone of our economy. They are indeed, but that's lip service only.
All right. That's an interesting statement. And I know you wouldn't make it if you didn't have the evidence of that. The fact that Senate Bill 4390 is sponsored by Senator Mike Lee. Do I understand you correctly?
Yes.
And what you're telling me is that while this bill looks good, it actually benefits big business. Let's talk about that. Why women-owned and minority businesses are at risk because of this bill. Can you go into more detail for us?
Yes. The current administration has rightly cleaned up a lot of DEI nonsense. But riding that momentum, this bill has been introduced with the same title in the House and the Senate as anti-discrimination, as if it's eliminating discrimination, whereas we see it as the exact opposite. This isn't a handout for women because women own 40% of all businesses in America, and they sell what the government buys. And yet, every year of our lives, companies owned by men have gotten 95, 96, 97, 98% of all federal contract dollars. The federal government is the biggest purchaser of goods and services on the planet. How much does the federal government spend every year? Is it 800 billion? Is it a trillion five? Is it 6 or 7 trillion? You
Wow.
can't get a single budget from any search or any source. However you slice it, what is spent on goods and services to American companies is admitted to be $800 billion a year. And the federal government has a couple of goals. One of which is that 23% of that spend should go to small businesses and 5% should go to companies owned by women for the last 30 years. And they've only hit that goal twice, they say. Usually it's 3 point something or 4 point something. But the fraud and the obfuscation and the lies we've seen for decades persuades us that any year 40% of all the businesses in America, women-owned small businesses, probably get 1% more or less every single year, meaning companies owned by men get 98, 99% of all the federal contract dollars. And those companies owned by women, they sell what the government buys. We could talk about how has this been allowed to go on and
Yeah.
perpetuate decade after decade.
Yeah,
But we
Bruce.
are also, yeah, and also we want to talk about what's the solution. It's so funny that these new bills were introduced April 27th. For the last year and a half, the major thing that we, the American Small Business League, ASBL.com, have been talking about is our Don't Cheat Women project, don'tcheatwomen.com. We want to raise from 5% to 15%, something more fair. Men companies would still get 85% of the federal contract dollars, but we want to raise that from 5 to 15. We've seen in the past where sometimes there have been federal moves that seem to be direct responses to some of our initiatives. I'm not claiming that for this. I'm just saying for the last year and a half, we've been on shows like this and we've been publishing a lot of pieces and calling a lot of groups to get them to lobby Congress. Please raise that goal. And then boom, 4 or 5 weeks ago, 5, 6 weeks ago, this new bill comes out and says, no, we want to get rid of all that, riding the waves of the outrage of a lot of that DEI insanity. But this is the basic realities that we need people to understand.
Bruce, thank you. That was really excellent. And I dare say that many listeners probably do not know the information that you just shared. What concerns me, what really jumped out at me is first and foremost, is the sloppy record keeping on the part of the government. We should not be
Mm.
guessing this amount of money goes here, that amount. That should be well documented. That should be detailed. That should be available to the public. Big business, small business, any business, legitimate business should be able to access that information. And it sounds to me like you guys are doing some guesswork there.
They publish a lot of information, the different agencies, the SBA.gov, Small Business Administration, and other.
But is
And
it is it detailed? Can you say, can you look at the end of 2026 next year, look at it and say, this percentage went to small business, this percentage went to women owned business, this went to minority owned? Do you have hardcore information like that?
well, anyone can find that. And yes, you can add it all up. And it seems to substantiate the annual claim we met the 23% goal. Actually, we surpassed it. That's what the SBA says every year. And the Small Business Administration is in charge of monitoring this and getting all the agencies to account and report to the SBA. Our agency has a 16% goal. Our agency has an 18% goal, so that the cumulative, the SBA can say 23% of all federal contract dollars,
Do you
24%, 25 went to legitimate small businesses. And now I can explain how we have found for decades that's never the truth.
Okay, so you have real reason to doubt the accuracy.
Yes. About 40 years ago, a man named Lloyd Chapman in California sued for accurate information about a federal contract and found that that contractor or the Pentagon at that time did not steer, I forget the figure, let's say, 16% of one particular contract to a legitimate small business. In reality, it was 1% or it was 2%. Well, Mr. Chapman went on a rampage. And in the ensuing decades, Kim, he has won over 100 freedom of information legal battles, mostly against the Pentagon, but also against many agencies of the federal government. And then 22 years ago, he formed the American Small Business League to continue this work. A lot of his findings launched congressional investigations into, are small business contracts, in quotes, going to small businesses? And on our site, you can see a lot of this where we show that every year, legitimate small businesses get far less than 23%.
Wow.
Lloyd has said over the years that he believes, in conjunction with a legal professor who has studied this and written about it, that every year, really, small businesses might get as little as 3 or 4% of the federal contract
Now, Bruce, I have
dollars.
to ask you, is that because they are not applying correctly? Are they not reaching out to government agencies correctly? Do they know how to do it? I'm trying to be devil's advocate here. Can you address that?
Yes. Right on our homepage, right at the top, we say through fraud, loopholes, bad policies, and et cetera, the majority of federal contract dollars are going to big businesses. The biggest reason is the exclusions. The language of the laws and the updates since 1953, there have been revisions and amendments, et cetera, but it basically says all federal contract dollars. And yet the SBA says, well, here are all these agencies that are excluded. Here are all these purchases that are excluded from the small business goal. The CIA, the post office, et cetera, et cetera. They're just excluded. So if we shrink the total of federal contract dollars that the goal has to be applied to, if it was just half, you could give 12% to small businesses and say that it's 23% of the half of the money that you're dealing with. That's the major thing. The other thing that comes to play is the wishy-washiness of how big a company can be and be called a small business by this
I was,
agency or
I was
that
wondering
agency.
about that. I was wondering what their criteria, what they call small
Yeah,
business.
right. It varied. It's not codified, but generally it's up to 500 employees. 99.9% of all businesses in America are small businesses by that general definition, up to 500 employees. But Kim, 98% of all businesses have less than 100
You're, yeah,
employees.
that's right.
Now, if that's a legitimate small business, in addition to these other factors, the number of companies that are getting small business contracts is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And those are the major ways that it comes down to what we have seen and what we say, far less than 23%. And Lloyd in the past has said it's probably as little as 3 or 4% really go to legitimate small
Wow.
businesses.
Are there strings attached to this money when they give out the money to small businesses for those lucky ones that get help?
They're not getting money like loans or grants. Their goods and services are being bought by the various federal agencies. Another thing they often do is they have a revolving door. The purchasing contractor at a federal agency is steering contracts to big businesses and calling them reporting that these are small business contracts. And because of the nature of the industry, et cetera, the company has 1,000 employees. It's got 5,000 employees. It's got a footprint globally around the world. And then lo and behold, very often he wants a change of pace. He leaves the federal agency and he gets hired at that company. And often the agencies recruit for their contracting the executives of the big companies that they have steered business to. So that's part of the momentum. That is the wall that real inquiry into this bumps up against.
To get these contracts, I think would be time consuming for small business. A larger business could employ somebody who that's all they sit and do all day is hunt for leads like this. And they could, I'm thinking a larger business could, you know, underbid a small business person because my understanding with the government, it's all about price. It's not quality. It just comes down whoever is the cheapest, which is not a good way to buy. But what say you, Bruce, with the 30 seconds we have left? We'll go into the next segment.
You just described another challenge to implementing the goals of the 1953 Small Business Act, created the SBA and created loans, and a fair portion of federal contracts should go to small businesses. Now it's 23%. It's a goal. It's just a goal. And you've described something accurately there. Yes.
Well, these things need to be addressed because the playing ground should be as level as it possibly can. We know that's impossible to do that completely, but it sounds like there are issues that need to be addressed. Folks, we're up against the break. Please stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. Good day, listeners, and welcome back to Don't Imbibe the Kool-Aid. Kim Kennedy here, your host for today's program. Having a very useful and informative conversation with Bruce Torres, who's Director of Communications for the American Small Business League. That is ASBL.com. A as in Apple, S as in Sam, B as in boy, L as in Larry.com. You really need to check that out. If you know people who are self-employed, if you're self-employed, it's in your best interest to check it out. Bruce, we're talking about the newly introduced bill in Congress, H.R. 8511, and in the House, that's in the House, and the Senate bill 4390. You're saying that it could end up actually eliminating federal contracting goals for women-owned small businesses and weekend programs designed to help minority-owned firms compete for government contracts, not a step forward for these groups who have been making strides in becoming self-employed and moving ahead in life. We were talking about, do they understand how to apply for these contracts, compared to larger businesses who have the capacity to hire people who, could just spend their time doing this all the time. You were starting to answer that when we had to go to break.
Yes, one can go to SBA.gov, the SBA's website, Small Business Administration, and start clicking into how to learn how to apply for a federal contract. Once you get a few clicks into it, it starts to become, it's laborious. There are many, many hoops and hurdles. Why does it have to be so cumbersome for this small business nation of ours? 36 million small businesses, 40% of which are owned by women. Why is it so hard to, at our don'tcheatwomen.com site and also at asbl.com, there's a great article about a study from 2023. Goldman Sachs talked to many women owners of their businesses, and they just said it's ridiculously hard to apply to become certified, because you have to become certified as a woman-owned small business in order to apply for federal contracts. Those that went through the process said it wasn't worth it. It was far too much work and then too hard to actually get certified. And then they talked to those that got certified, and they said it's just too hard to apply for the contracts. For as open door and easy as it might seem at first clicking on SBA.gov, that's what it takes. So it's another example of how the federal government and the SBA can be fairly accused under Democrat and Republican administrations alike going back decades. It's not meant to be easy. The giant corporations, 0.1% of all businesses, that get most, if not 90, 95, 96, 98% of all federal contract dollars, love it the way that it is.
Well, if it ain't broke for them, why fix it? But as you're talking right away, immediately my mind goes to, there was a time in our country where innovation and ingenuity were, it really, America changed the world in so many ways, including business. It used to be, you don't hear it talked about anymore, but where candidates would say, government's going to get out of your way so you can work, so you can develop. So, that was extolled as a virtue. It's not anymore on either side of the aisle. You have overregulation. You have, if you are successful, you're the bad guy. You have privilege. You have this, that, the other. The idea that you work hard, and that's how you get ahead, folks. Privilege has very, very little to do with it. Working hard has a lot to do with it. They're not the bad guys. Those are the employers, as you correctly said. It's the small business sector that employs most people. But that's endangered today by a government that wants to control every aspect of life. You've got a lot of would-be Marxists in office. Bruce, I've said it and I'll continue to say it, but I think it should be required. Two things. First of all, if you're going to run for office, you need to pass a written test and sign off on it that you can demonstrate knowledge of the Constitution, and swear to uphold it, because if you are found in violation of that, it can be used as grounds to dismiss you. But I also think that people should not go from school to a government office. It should be required that you work in the private sector before you run for office. I believe that many of the problems in our country are created in DC. And this is just another example of it. Here we have something that's supposed to help the small guy, but Bruce, the evidence is that you've presented to us is just the opposite. It's keeping the money in the family, as I like to say. Keeping it circulating from one big business, big government. Look at the fraud that's been uncovered. I mean, it's on steroids right now, Bruce. It's in their face. They don't even try to hide. Or, you've got people over here, Medicare being exploited, money being sent around the world, and they're trying to stop that. I do think, but this is, like you said, these are decades old fraud. It really interesting thing, folks, and it's not just a hobby. If you take a look at late 1800s, early 1900s history, that's when these organizations really started to become very highly organized. You've got the creature of Jekyll Island,
the creation of the Federal Reserve, and the
yes, which is
implementation of a
completely illegal.
and the federal
And
income tax. Lots of shadiness there.
yes,
To oppose that bill and learn our goals and try to help, I steer people to our Substack, asbl.substack.com, and a post on May 21st called ASBL 70, that's the podcast episode, Save Minority-Owned and Women-Owned Small Businesses. That Substack post, asbl.substack.com, on May 21st, Save Those Businesses, it's a nice little article that includes links where one can find your representative and your senators easily.
wonderful.
GovTrack.us, GovTrack.us. But also in that article, there's a list. The congressman and the senator who introduced those bills, you could call their offices and voice your opposition. We have a nice little script. I oppose this bill, different number for the House, different number for the Senate, for these succinct reasons. Plus, the 4 committees that it was referred to in the House, their phone numbers. Call those committees and say, I oppose this bill. Hang up. And the one committee in the Senate it was referred to, but also, why wasn't it referred to? The Senate's Small Business Committee. So call both of those. If somebody printed that out and spent a half hour, you would enjoy talking to the young, chipper people who answer the phone in a congressperson's and senator's office. They're fun to talk to. Or leave a nice, get good at those, enjoy giving those voicemails, take a half hour, do it. And you know why, Kim? Every year, less than 10% of Americans ever contact their representative or their senator about anything. Less than 10%. Can you imagine if everyone who complains about political things contacted their representative or their senator on a regular basis? We would transform this country. Print out that Substack, give yourself a little assignment, and then take yourself out for a milkshake as a reward.
Anybody can take 10, 15 minutes to make a phone call, to compose an email.
And you can print that out and keep it next to your phone for every news item and new stupid thing you hear Congress is doing, and call them about it.
Yeah, folks, communication is key. Please don't listen to those cynics who say it doesn't make a difference. It does. I have talked to my state senators and I asked them, and to a T, every one of them told me when they hear from their constituents, it makes a difference. And I have to clarify that with organic, not these forms that you get, fill out, sign your name to this protest, and they say they throw them out. Well, when they can tell something is written by them, you can take the talking points that Bruce just mentioned on the Substack page of ASBL and make it your own. But they need to hear from us, and they need to hear from us regularly. Welcome back to Don't Imbibe the Kool-Aid. I'm Kim Kennedy, your host for today's program. So glad that you're with us, listeners. And we've been talking with Bruce Torres. He is the Director of Communications for the American Small Business League and the Don't Cheat Women Project that supports advocacy work that aims to elevate women-owned small businesses in federal contracting. You'll want to check that website out at asbl.com. They're doing important work. They're doing needed work. You need to be aware of this organization. Share it with those who are thinking about starting a business, are in small business, and so they can know what this organization offers them. So, Bruce, thank you again. We look forward to talking with you again in the near future.
Thank you so much. An honor and a privilege. Best to you always.
Thank you, Bruce. And listeners, thank you for being with us. We appreciate you. Join us again tomorrow at the same time for another edition of Don't Imbibe the Kool-Aid. Have a great day.